Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history, the show where we take a single date, peel back the layers of time, and realize humanity has been making bold, questionable, and occasionally catastrophic decisions on a remarkably consistent schedule. Today, April 22nd, is less of a day and more of a historical highlight reel of ambition, chaos, accidental discoveries, and people confidently making choices that future historians would describe as deeply unfortunate but fascinating. Let's take a walk through the centuries and watch empires wobble, leaders improvise, and entire civilizations pivot in ways that feel both dramatic and weirdly familiar. Segment 1. Empires on fire and improvised armies. The Roman Empire in 238 AD decided to demonstrate that even the most powerful superpower can unravel when leadership becomes a rotating cast of questionable decisions. Known as the Year of the Six Emperors, this period was less about stability and more about seeing how many rulers you can go through before lunch. In North Africa, wealthy landowners revolted against Emperor Maximinus Thrax, elevating Gordian I and his son, Gordian II, as co-emperors, which sounds official until you realize it was basically a regional uprising with branding. The Roman Senate, eager to oppose Maximinus, backed them immediately, proving that political decisions made out of spite have a long and proud history. The problem came when the Gordians had to actually defend their claim. Their army consisted largely of enthusiastic civilians with farming tools, which is great for harvesting crops, but less effective against trained legionaries. When the professional forces of Capellianus marched in, the battle near Carthage turned into a swift and brutal collapse. Gordian II was killed, Gordian I took his own life, and the Senate suddenly realized it had backed a losing team. In response, they scrambled to install new emperors, creating even more instability. Meanwhile, in Rome, mobs released gladiators to fight the Praetorian Guard, turning the capital into something between a riot and a live-action arena. It's a reminder that when institutions fail, people tend to improvise solutions, and those solutions are rarely calm, orderly, or particularly effective. Segment 2. And when the world literally darkens. In 536 AD, humanity faced a crisis that makes political chaos look almost manageable. A massive volcanic eruption sent ash into the atmosphere, dimming sunlight across much of the world and dropping temperatures significantly. Contemporary accounts describe the sun as shining like the moon, which is poetic if you're writing a novel and terrifying if you're trying to grow food. Crops failed, famine spread, and historians now consider this one of the worst years to be alive. And yet, human institutions carried on as if the sky wasn't literally dimming. Pope Agapetus I traveled to Constantinople on a diplomatic mission, attempting to negotiate political conflicts while the environment itself was collapsing. He fell ill and died there, creating a sudden leadership vacuum in the church at a moment when stability was already fragile. The broader consequences were severe. The climate shock weakened populations, making them more vulnerable to disease. And just a few years later, the plague of Justinian would devastate the region. The irony is difficult to ignore. While leaders debated theology and territorial control, the natural world was undergoing a transformation that would reshape societies far more dramatically than any political argument. It's a pattern that feels familiar. Humanity often focuses on immediate conflicts, while larger, slower-moving crises quietly build in the background. Segment 3, and power, crowds, and convenient legality. By 1073, the question of who gets to lead wasn't just about politics. It was about who could command the loudest room. During the funeral of Pope Alexander II, a crowd in Rome suddenly began chanting for Hildebrand to become the next pope. This was not how papal elections were supposed to work, but it had momentum, and momentum has always been a powerful force in history. Hildebrand was physically carried into power, becoming Pope Gregory VII in a process that looked less like a formal election and more like a spontaneous takeover. Once in position, Gregory didn't hesitate to expand the authority of the papacy. asserting that the Pope could depose emperors. This was a bold claim, and unsurprisingly, emperors did not respond with enthusiasm. The resulting investiture controversy became a prolonged struggle between church and state, reshaping the political landscape of Europe. What makes this moment fascinating is the blend of spectacle and strategy. Historians still debate whether the crowd's actions were genuinely spontaneous or carefully orchestrated. But either way, the result was the same: a shift in power achieved through a mix of public pressure and institutional adaptation. It's a reminder that legitimacy in leadership often comes from perception as much as procedure. Segment 4, and accidental empires and strategic loopholes. April 22nd also highlights how empires can begin with what are described as accidents, though they often look suspiciously intentional. In 1500, Pedro Alvarez Cabral arrived on the coast of what is now Brazil while supposedly heading to India. Whether this was a navigational error or a calculated move remains debated, but the outcome was clear. Portugal claimed a vast new territory, setting in motion centuries of colonization and economic exploitation. Meanwhile, in 1519, Hernán Cortés demonstrated that conquest isn't just about military strength, it's also about legal creativity. Facing the possibility of being labeled a traitor, Cortés founded the settlement of Veracruz and established a local government loyal to him. He then resigned his original commission and had the new council appoint him as leader under the authority of the Spanish crown. In one move, he transformed himself from a rogue commander into a legitimate representative. It's an extraordinary example of how systems can be manipulated from within. These events show that the expansion of empires often relied on a combination of exploration, opportunism, and administrative maneuvering. The map of the world didn't just change because of battles. It changed because of decisions made on ships, beaches, and pieces of paper. Segment 5, and hope, hype, and the seeds of chaos. In 1509, Henry VIII became King of England, and the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. After the heavy-handed rule of his father, the new king's early actions, freeing prisoners, arresting unpopular officials, and projecting energy and charisma, made him seem like a refreshing change. Contemporary observers described widespread joy, with people celebrating as though a burden had been lifted. It's a powerful reminder of how quickly public perception can shift when leadership changes. However, history gives us the benefit of hindsight, and we know that this promising beginning would evolve into a reign marked by religious upheaval, political executions, and personal drama that would reshape England permanently. Henry's break with the Catholic Church and establishment of the Church of England were driven by personal and dynastic concerns, but had far-reaching consequences. The contrast between the optimism of his accession and the reality of his later rule highlights a recurring theme. Early promise does not guarantee long-term stability. Leaders often begin with broad support, only to make decisions that fundamentally alter the trajectory of their nations in unexpected ways. Segment 6, and modern chaos, innovation, and turning points. As we move into more recent history, April 22nd continues to deliver moments that blend progress with tension. In 1915, during World War I, the Second Battle of Ypres introduced large-scale chemical warfare as chlorine gas drifted across the battlefield, creating panic and devastation. It marked a grim turning point, demonstrating how technological innovation could amplify the horrors of war. Decades later, in 1945, Adolf Hitler, facing the collapse of Nazi Germany, finally acknowledged defeat inside the Führer bunker, a moment that signaled the end of the regime and the approaching conclusion of the war in Europe. In contrast to these moments of destruction, April 22, 1970 saw the first Earth Day, when millions of people across the United States participated in demonstrations advocating for environmental protection. This massive mobilization led to significant policy changes, including the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a striking juxtaposition. The same date that witnessed some of humanity's darkest decisions also became a symbol of collective action aimed at preserving the planet. Add to that the quiet technological breakthrough of optical fiber communication in 1977, which laid the groundwork for modern global connectivity, and you see a pattern emerge. History is not linear or consistent. It is a series of overlapping stories, some destructive, some hopeful, all interconnected. In conclusion, April 22nd serves as a reminder that history is rarely defined by a single type of event. It is a mixture of ambition, error, innovation, and resilience. Empires rise and fall, leaders make bold and sometimes reckless decisions, and societies adapt in ways that are both inspiring and deeply flawed. What connects these moments is not just the date, but the underlying human tendency to act with confidence, even in uncertainty. Whether it's a Roman senator backing the wrong emperor, a medieval crowd elevating a pope, or a modern movement demanding environmental change, the story remains the same. People shape history, often without fully understanding the consequences, and the results echo far beyond their own time.